make a start. Welcome to Exceptional Effort, Mind and Body. Today we are talking about food, vitality and you. Welcome, and it's a pleasure to have our audience here. And from our perspective, we're looking at different things that will help how your energy level is, how food affects your body. We all have different experiences. From my perspective, I'm kind of a bit lucky where I can eat most things, but I just don't like fish, so I choose not to eat that. And so, yeah, if you want to share some of your experience, Annemie, you've probably got some good stories in relation to food, because you were actually quite unwell for, about 10 years, is that correct?
Yes, something like that. Yes, that was a worst period, yes. I'm much better now, luckily. Well, during that period, I was, for some reason, not able to digest my food properly. And I had to find another way. In the beginning, they just poured some soup into my mouth, and that was the only thing I was able to digest. And so we stumbled upon a diet by coincidence, which was the GAPS diet, which is GAPS. It's a diet which is very basic, and it's to heal the gut. And so in the beginning, it's just soup, and then you can add gradually. You can add meats and fish, and as well as some vegetables, and as well as some fruits like applesauce. But it's all very gradually, and it took me a very long time before I could see some change. But I had no other choice because it was the only thing I was able to digest. And then after 18 months, all of a sudden, something changed, and I was able to eat a lot more than before. And we're, let's say, 15 years later almost now, and I'm able to eat almost anything again. There are just a few things that are still not possible, but I can enjoy anything. That's the best part of it now.
And Heather, you have some interesting rules in relation to food where you have, is it a twice removed rule, I understand?
Yeah. Many years ago, when I first started reading about nutrition and holistic medicine, I came across this removed from nature rule, which is probably more complex than what I'm remembering, but the gist is essentially to try to keep all of your food less than 2 steps removed from nature. So a whole natural food in its original form is step 1. As soon as you cook it or process it once, then it's once removed from nature. And in Western society, when we go to the grocery store, a lot of the food that we're buying and eating has been removed multiple times. So it's been processed, it's been cooked, it's been pasteurized, it's been irradiated, it's been, something's been added to it so much that it's not recognizable as its original form anymore. So I try to stick with the 2 times rule as much as possible.
And the basis behind that 2 times rule, what does that do for the food? Did you do much research into that as to how it affects the food, or?
Yeah. So the idea is that the food you eat, right, all of the vitamins and nutrients in there, the fats and things that are healthy for you they're delicate, they can be altered, they can be damaged, especially when it comes to fats. And the information that's in your food can be altered and corrupted and damaged, so that by the time you've processed something many, many times, it's not giving you the vitamins and nutrients you need. It's not giving good messages to your cells to do their job. So it can be ranging anywhere from just useless, empty calories to actually harmful and damaging food once you've processed it many times. Yeah.
And Stephen, go, Annemie.
Go ahead.
The same counts for supplements. They are same for fish oil. It becomes rancid after a certain while for the same reason, I believe.
Yes, yeah, you can definitely, if exposed to oxygen and light, all these valuable nutrients do start to break down and become less useful to you, or even harmful. Yeah.
Carrot straight out of the ground is probably one of the first things to eat. Is
Yeah. Well, have you ever eaten nuts like fresh off a tree?
Oh, they're amazing.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
amazing.
I grew up with hazelnuts straight off the tree. It's totally different. Yeah.
One of my friends, he was an ag guy out in Davis, and yeah, like walnuts, almonds. It's so different. The flavor is so much different. Well, it's like even fruit and vegetables fresh off the tree is much different than the store.
Yeah, you can taste the difference in those oils and fats, and so what they're doing for you or not doing for you is going to be different depending on the quality that you're taking in.
And that's part of that vitality is getting the energy, being able to convert what's the energy in the food for your body to be able to convert that efficiently and then be able to use that energy and having more of that available within the food because it is fresh gives you more chance of that happening. And this is partly to do with the type of food you eat. I know from my experience, if I'm eating something that's quite heavy, that takes a lot more processing power from the body to actually get the energy out of that. And I've done a couple of things in my life. I've been a vegetarian, like strict vegetarian, and at that time I was doing bodybuilding as well. And I found that I was actually able to bulk up quite a lot of weight and had plenty of energy. I was eating a lot of high protein foods like broccoli and a lot of green vegetables that have a lot of protein in them. So I was able to bulk up while bodybuilding, but I found that natural, the digestive system worked a lot better because a friend of mine at the same time I was working out with, he ate a lot of meats, and although he did bulk up, he was tired a lot, whereas I had a lot more energy because my body was still able to utilize that energy without as much processing power, so I wasn't losing so much energy on the digestion side of things.
Yeah, proteins far more than carbohydrates and fat. You know, like thinking about that, like it takes a lot to really get it down.
So from your perspective, Stephen, I mean, you are actually you do like 5-hour rides.
Physically active, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's honestly it varies. I try to keep my diet kind of like Heather's, like less processed the better for me. I come to find that, like every once in a while I'll need like a Coca-Cola or something, and guilty, like there's days like where I'll actually have sugar crashes from between having ridden like 130 miles and had far too much caffeine and sugar, and you get massive headaches the next day. But yeah, on the whole, like just clean diet. I try to steer clear from heavy fat and carbohydrate combinations. So like especially like sugar, sugars, fats, like all the nice things that get you going. And then every once in a while, I love a nice hamburger, like a nice hamburger after a long ride. But yeah, on the whole, just clean and sticking to really what works for my body, and what my body craves at any one moment may not be the same as it is say like 3 months from now, 4 months from now. And then dependent upon like what it is that I'm cycling through as far as workouts go, like if I'm doing sprint work, I typically crave heavier meals. So like I will go to like the hamburger, or we'll go to, for whatever reason, I don't know exactly why. And then when I'm doing the longer endurance stuff, like when I'm doing 100-mile rides, or, in some respects, longer, it's, a lot of carbohydrates, and for whatever reason, just more sugar-based content. Although, being cognizant and aware of what it is that I'm consuming from a sugar standpoint, I hate high fructose corn syrup. The taste of it, I can taste the difference between it and sugar. So I don't know why that is. I don't know how that is for everybody else, but for me, I'm sensitive to that.
Mm-hmm. Stephen, I'm curious if you've ever not been super active, and then if your digestion and your diet were different at that time. Because like I said, I'm not very active, and I find I can't even eat sugar. If I do, and I do crave it sometimes and I eat it, I feel instantly sick. And I wonder if that's because my body is actually not burning it off in any way, and it's just sitting in my gut, feeding bad bacteria, causing issues for me. I'm not able to utilize that sugar, and I just
honestly. That's a good question. I mean, for me personally, when I have been sedentary, like I fractured my clavicle last year, and I was off the bike for probably about 8 8 to 12 weeks. I mean, I was writing very like mildly, but I did notice that my diet, while it didn't change drastically, the amount of consumption changed. So I would be satiated or full much more readily when I was physically inactive. So my body, like, for whatever reason, was just like, okay, you don't need this. So we're really going to cut down what it is that you're taking in. And I mean, obviously, with that, you notice like everything else that comes with it, like, you know, the musculature, everything else just started. It started slowly. It was nonetheless mainly in my right arm, until I got it back up to speed again. But yeah, I noticed that was the biggest change that I had noticed, was the amount of food consumed. Energy levels stayed, relatively there. I think that I was getting a little bit stir crazy. So, in maintaining my diet, I was more ready to go once I was able to, if that makes sense. So like I was craving to be exercised, and at the same time I had, a great nutritional balance going on. And I think that played into my recovery and getting me back onto the road again. But yeah, that's like the closest thing that I can think of. The last time that I was sedentary or like truly incapacitated from exercise was probably when I was 20. And, at that point, I mean, I was, again, just, for whatever reason, I just cut back, and my body just doesn't crave nearly as much food. So I hope that answers your question. It's like how I perceive it and what it is that I go through, what I've gone through personally.
Mm-hmm. Heather, just a question. There are some people who burn more easily glucose and other people who burn more easily fats. So maybe something that you can test. I know there are some tests that with the breathing and with the pH of the saliva and the urine, you can test if you're more fat burner than a sugar burner, let's say. So if you say it's more the sugar that makes me feel bad, extra sugar, that's a way to, I tested it once and I was just in the middle. I was neither a sugar or fat. I was just in the middle. So I just stick to my regular diet today because I was wondering, should I go to keto, to more fats, or should I stay to my regular diet? But since the result was, just in the middle, I didn't have a clear result, let's say, to make a choice at that point. And I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Yeah, I haven't heard of specifically testing for how you're processing each of these. But I know that if you're not physically active, if you're not transporting insulin from your system into your muscles and then burning it off, then you've got insulin just kicking around in your body, which is where so much of the damage from not just diabetes, the obvious disease result, but all the other chronic diseases comes from, is having this excess of insulin skating around in your circulatory system, and it does damage. The first time I read about that was I think 10 or 15 years ago. I read a book called like The Insulin Factor, and it was shocking to find out what a role sugar and inefficient processing of insulin, excess elevated insulin, plays in cognitive dysfunction, heart disease, cancer, the gambit of medical issues you can trace back to insulin. And exercise is a factor because you can burn that off if you're taking in that sugar, and you can do something with it. But to a point, I don't even know if you can get rid of stuff like those really bad what do you call it, high fructose corn syrups and stuff,
or like aspartame, like the artificial sugars. And actually they've come to determine that some of those, I mean, and I've read some research articles here from my end, that they're like, they can be on the upward end of like 25 to 50 times sweeter than actual sugar.
So
it's like, and so there's really no testing protocol for something that's that much more potent than sugar is.
I wonder if we're used to some of these things though. So we were talking about vitality, Damian, and it's possible that people in a society where we're used to eating a lot of sugar and refined carbs, if we don't know what vitality feels like, if we're used to feeling a little
Normal.
tired, a little run down, a bit bloated, slightly headachy, all these sort of symptoms of having elevated, chronically elevated insulin, and if we feel a little bit crappy all the time, do we know what it feels like to have vitality and to feel energized by our food? Say us, like we in general, we tend to be a bit conscious of what we're eating, but I know that the community around us is not.
I know when I eat a lot of sugar for 3 days, I fly. I have lots of energy, and this is what you talk about this insulin resistance, which is starting to build up. It's exactly when I have an overload of sugar for a few days, but after that, I crack again. Of course.
It's an interesting point that you have raised there, Heather, and it touches on, from my perspective, what Stephen was talking about earlier as well, is paying attention to what you need. And I know from my perspective, there'll be times in the morning I'll wake up and I'll trust in what I feel, and I won't feel like eating. I might get to 11 o'clock and I actually haven't eaten anything. I'll drink water. I'll make sure, when I get up in the morning, I generally make sure I have a glass of water just to start the day. But other times in the day, I will find that I'll wake up sometimes and I won't have anything to eat at all until about 11 o'clock. Other days when I wake up, I'll feel that I need that straight away. And I'll also trust in what I feel. Sometimes I might feel like I need to have, I like to, from time to time, have an egg and bacon breakfast. And I'll feel that I need that cooked food. Other times what I'll have is I'll have a bit of granola with fruit and yogurt and honey on it, and with a bit of juice mixed in with that, and I'll have that because that's what I feel that I need. And I've noticed when I don't trust that and I say, I should have this, then all of a sudden that energy level and that vitality dips. And more so, I did this to the extreme the other day. For whatever reason, when I was driving home, I had a craving for KFC, as ridiculous as that was. But instead of getting something light, just a small bit, and I trust in that, I don't have a problem having a bit of KFC every now and then, but I went overboard and I ate too much. So I not only did I get the wrap with the large chips, but I got some tenders as well, and I just way too much food. And I think that's a really big key to the vitality is eating the food that you need to eat, not overdoing it. And a lot of times, especially with the sugar and the fat, because it triggers senses in our parts of our brain where we want it more, especially sugar. It becomes an addiction, and when you have it, I notice that, like when I eat, for example, chocolate, I have a piece of chocolate, then I immediately want more. And that is an addiction similar to nicotine and smoking, where you want that more of that, and then as a result of that affects your vitality. So they're just paying attention to what you really need as opposed to what is being what you think you need.
What we really need seems to be far less than we think. Recent studies have shown that we eat way too much in Western culture. Like far too much, and these multi-meals a day that people are recommending aren't really based on sound science. And what I find fascinating is that this new information comes up and we think it's new, but it actually aligns beautifully with so many health traditions that are centuries old, where they knew, many years ago that periods of fasting are really good for you, and that going periods without eating and eating small amounts is good for you. And they may not have known the scientific reasons behind that, but now we do, and we're catching up to understanding how well our bodies function without food, periods of fasting, and much smaller portions. So I find that fun how we're so smart now that we're just catching up to what we knew a couple thousand years ago.
It was interesting that you mentioned that, Heather, because I remember reading.
Actually, can I say something, Damian? Can I say something?
Certainly, Ed.
Can I go ahead?
Go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, for sugar, if regarding the sugar, what I was listening to that, if somebody is having diabetes, then there is a controlled intake of sugar for patients who are having diabetes. Suppose because
I just feel
the job has always been that place where I've been needed.
What you're about to hear is an unscripted.
I don't know what we're hearing.
What you're about to hear is an unscripted one-time counseling session focused on work. For the purposes of maintaining confidentiality, names, employers, and other identifiable characteristics have been removed.
We don't know where that's coming from.
Okay.
That's an awareness, I think.
Strange. Yes, you're quite correct about diabetes.
Yeah. I'll just sum up in 2 lines. That's the point, is that if somebody is having diabetes, then he can have a controlled intake of sugar. If somebody is not having any diabetes or any problem, he or she can take sugar. Absolutely, there is no problem. Now, sugar, the sugar point of view, because it is now a much discussed topic where I live in India. The number of diabetes patients, the number of patients having sugar has increased a lot. So this is this is a very hot topic of discussion in India regarding
That's
this.
right. Yeah, diabetes rates are on the rise there.
So, as per my experience, I said, because myself, I had a one time, and still now I like cold drinks. I like Pepsi. I like Coke. I used to have a lot of Pepsi. I used to have a lot of Coke. But now I don't have any sugary aerated drinks. I only have no sugar drinks because in the year 2012 I had jaundice, and after that doctor advised me. So my point is that the final point is that the sugar is your choice. But if you are having any medical symptoms like diabetes or anything, then you have a controlled intake of sugar. Otherwise, if another point is that if there is a sugar fall in your body, then that is also injurious to health also. There should be a balance there actually regarding taking of sugar, intake of sugar.
And that's one of the things that was brought up earlier when we were talking about in our pre-meeting, was that, and this is the difficult thing with diet, is everybody's unique. So some people will have something that works for them, and then other people have something that doesn't work. I think you were talking a little bit about that before. Do you want to speak a bit on that?
Yeah, similarly, like, can I go ahead?
Yeah.
Who are you speaking to?
Can I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, like fatty foods, what you are telling, actually food is a choice, personal choice. Now, if you have some medical history or medical problems in where your doctor advises you not to take sugar or not to take fatty foods, that's a different proposition altogether. But when it is your choice, suppose in India you have in certain part fatty foods are very much a choice, and somewhere all the foods are having less fats or less spices. So my point is that ultimately at the end of the day, food is your choice. But you have healthy food, and that nourishes your body, that gives you nutrition, and that should give you the energy, and that should power you to go to run in your life. That should be the perspective of having the food, actually.
Exactly, and that's part of what we were talking about before. Exactly, is paying attention to what works for you. And so from my perspective, I ate way too much of the fatty food, which I felt it afterwards. Like for about 4 hours, I was like down and struggling with energy because I'd eaten too much. And coming back to what we were talking about before too, with eating too much, I remember reading a study. They actually did an analysis of the prisoners of war that came out of the concentration camps in World War II, following World War II, and they found that from a physical perspective, these people were actually very, very healthy from their body, but they hadn't had so much of the diet. And that's part of what we deal with today is we have this food freely available to us, and a lot of times people are looking for something to do, and then they because they've got nothing to do, they have something to eat, and then they struggle with their health because they have eaten too much. And as Heather was talking about before, we don't need to eat as much food as we think we need to eat. And that comes to, do we really know what vitality is? And from my perspective, I've noticed a big point here where eating that vitality, if I eat too much, I can feel that down. I know there's that little bit of a headache, little bit of body aches, but then when I'm actually managing and balancing myself well, all of a sudden that energy is there, and I can go. And as I was saying before the meeting, I've been for the past probably 4 days, I've been going to bed about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. Then I've been up at 7 and had plenty of energy. And I'm awake. It's Australia here. It's 1:30 in the morning, and I've still got plenty of energy because then that's part of that vitality. Do we know what that is? So.
Mm-hmm. I felt like I have more energy since I started intermittent fasting, which was mid-February.
You want to describe a bit more about what that intermittent fasting is, Heather?
Sure. Well, like you were saying earlier that you often don't feel like eating till 11 a.m. I found that I wasn't getting hungry until even later than that. So I did a little research into intermittent fasting because people have been talking about all the health benefits of that, and decided to kind of schedule that sort of later eating with a small window between about 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. That's when I eat, so that there's a much longer period of time where I'm not busy digesting anything. I think the calories I'm consuming are about the same, but I'm just keeping it all kind of within a small window. And that gives me a lot more time to feel light and empty, and to give my my metabolism, my GI system a break. And I'm finding that I have a lot more mental clarity and a lot more physical energy. For the first few days, I was getting hungry, like earlier than I was set to eat. But that actually fades off pretty quickly. Once you've been doing it for a little while, you don't feel excessively hungry. So I don't know how long I will do this for, but it seems to work for me right now, which is, like we were saying earlier, you got to kind of listen to your body and do what is working for your body. For me right now, this is working for me, and it's giving me a lot of energy. And yeah.
Annemie,
your mic.
You had that, and Annemie, from your perspective, you were, obviously bedridden for like a number of years, and
Yes.
then as we're talking, you're telling me before you went on a bike ride today. So you've had the extremes of, being completely stuck and then having that energy. How have you found that, the quantity of the food has affected you, or noticed the difference in how that affects your body?
No, it's not the quantity of food at all, but it's what I eat, which is important.
Yep.
I like slow sugars, which is for me rather important. When I eat slow sugars, I can really thrive, and I like to eat like an egg. An egg gives me superpowers. It's really something that
So eggs give you superpowers?
Oh, eggs give me superpowers, really. If I eat an egg, I can function really for a very long time, always. I read this once in a book, a guy who was kidnapped for 6 months, and they only gave him 1 egg a day. It was somewhere in the remote backcountry, and these were really healthy chickens, and it was not from one shop somewhere. And so he ate just 1 egg, and he lost a lot of kilos afterwards, but he was in much better shape when he came back, when he was released of his ordeal, let's say, than before. He was very healthy. All his health parameters were excellent. So I was thinking, well, if that can happen to someone who is kidnapped for 6 months in a small room, well, why can't this happen to me when I'm bedridden? I can function with 1 egg maybe as well. So I started adding eggs after a few years, and I really enjoy them very much. They give me lots of energy.
Beautiful. All right, we're starting to run out of time, so if we all want to recap just something that we can take away, that people can take away and use to help with their vitality as a business professional. Stephen, do you want to start with that?
I was just going to say, listen to your body, listen to what it is that it's craving at any moment. It's going to be different from everybody. Don't take studies completely at face value, especially ones that are condensed in small areas, and let that be the norm. Like, listen to your body, listen to what you need, and, you know, go from there, and everybody's going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
Heather?
Yeah, I would definitely concur with that. I think that we all have different needs, therefore our diet should be customized for us. In general, trying to keep your food as close to the natural source as possible, as unprocessed as possible. It means that you're going to have the most efficient use of those vitamins and nutrients, and hopefully keep the toxic load down in the food that you're eating.
Absolutely. That's an interesting point. We haven't touched on that, and maybe that's a topic for another one, is when you talk about the toxic, is how many other chemicals and things like that in food. So maybe that's a topic for another day. Annemie, what takeaways would you like to share?
Well, the most important has been said already by Stephen and Heather, I believe. Well, I think when you eat something, listen to your body. When you feel fatigued afterwards, or it doesn't give you enough energy after 2 hours, it means that it's not the right thing for you at that moment. Well, at least that's how I function. When I eat something and after 2 hours I'm hungry again, it means it's not the right food for me. So I try to find something else.
Fantastic. So from what I've got, the key thing that we're taking away from our managing our vitality is really to listen to your body as to what your body needs. Pay attention to that. So be in tune with what you need. And sometimes it might be you don't need to eat, or it might be a type of food you need to. I know from my perspective, I'll have a craving of a certain food that I know I need to eat. And Stephen, you also mentioned about pay attention to what's in the studies. So when we're looking at a study, pay attention to the type of person that was involved in that study, because that might not be applicable to your body, because we're all very different, and we have different
bias too, like you were saying. So like the bias, just adding in like the bias too as well, like making sure that it's general, it's a generalized and it's a diverse study, or that it includes, like you said, does it fit my body type? So.
Right. We often hear about information from studies and it's only part of the picture, so it's like we're missing a lot of context and aspects of the picture, for sure.
Yeah. And that's a very good point to say with studies is, you have to look at the information behind the study, because if you actually, an example that I was given once is if you're not careful reading a study, you might believe that playing basketball makes you taller. So it is very important to look at what's behind that study rather than just reading and saying, "Oh, that's fact." One of the other key points that we're taking away is they're keeping the food as natural as possible, so that you can maximize the energy that you get from that food. And they're the key takeaways that we've got. So we are running out of time, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your contribution again. Is it Rana? Is that, if I'm pronouncing that correctly?
Welcome. Yeah, it's okay.
Very much appreciate you joining and contributing.
Thank
you very much, Maria, for joining us as well. It's a pleasure having you here. So that wraps up Exceptional Effort, Mind and Body for this week. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
a lot.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.